Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. Doing good. Healing from eating too much at Thanksgiving. And the sad part about that, dangerous part, maybe better said, is I did the cooking. So, and I'm still alive. I'm still above ground. So it's all good. Hope everybody else had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We've had a big week here in Jacksonville. You know, last night's show at Daly's Place was a barn burner, to say the very least. Folks are going to be talking about that one for a while. I'm anxious to see what the ratings are going to be because I anticipate it did real well. So, but things good. You know, things are good. You know, it's just a really cool thing. You know, I was had guests. I had after Thanksgiving, Jerry Lawler and his family came in, and I took him to the Browns and Jags game. So that was pretty good. That'll get people talking for no reason, for absolutely no reason.
Isn't that funny though? You and I talked about, recently you had another visitor to the suite. One of your talents, is, in a romantic relationship with a WWE talent, and they joined you guys in the suite, and a picture popped up online, and it may have even been you who posted it, and everybody lost their mind. And it's like, guys, WWE performers are allowed to have a normal life where they, you know, go to sporting events with their loved ones. This is not a big deal.
Right. Well, Britt Baker and Adam Cole are a couple.
Right.
And they've been a couple for a long time. And, you know, she's still working her dental practice and all those things, but they live in Orlando. So it's about a 2-hour drive, somewhere thereabouts. So she came up to the game and she said, I'm bringing Austin. That's his real name. And I said, so I'm thinking, you're bringing Steve Austin to the game? That's great. He's a good kid, though. Adam Cole's he's a hell of a hand, no doubt, and a nice young man. He really is a nice young man and a credit to our business. But it had nothing to do with business.
No, it's football, man. Come on.
That's all. Well, they're Steeler fans.
Right.
You know, Britt's from Pittsburgh, and Adam Cole is from, I think, Lancaster. So they're Pennsylvania folks, and her especially is she's a massive Steelers fan, like my wife Jan was. So just you grew up with it. It's part of your heritage. So they came and had a good time. It was a football weekend. That's all it was. They drove up, they went to the game, they drove home.
Yeah. I love that everything's a controversy these days, but there's no controversy about what's going over at jrsbbq.com. You guys had a big Black Friday. I guess everybody online did, but you had some special offerings, and you can still place your order in time for Christmas, right, Jim?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we came up with this idea, you know, when you start thinking about how you're going to market your stuff, it entails a lot of planning. You know, regardless to say, we had to order boxes, custom made boxes for all these items to fit in. So we got 3 different levels of packages. The boxes are sturdy, very shipping friendly. And like you and I were chatting about before we started recording, you know, if a person wants to order a package or 2 or 3 or 10 or whatever, and you want them to go to a separate different place, you know, through our system, we can do that. So you can make one order, click the boxes that and the addresses that you want where to go, and pardon me, and and we can accommodate that. Then I came up with the idea. So, well, you know, I did run the numbers, and well, why don't we just pay for the shipping? So free shipping on those packages. And they're loaded with stuff. They're different price points, jrsbbq.com, and business is good. We're very grateful. You know, my partner in that world, my operations guy, Stephen Link, you know, we were discussing how busy you think we'll be. I said, you're going to be really surprised, and pleasantly so, about how loyal wrestling fans are. They're going to support their own. And so that's kind of what we're seeing. You know, the fans are turning out, and it's a good gift, you know, something that can hang around. Or if you buy one package and it's got multiple items in it, you just created yourself multiple stocking stuffers. So it's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but its business is good, and I really do appreciate it. And yeah, right now you can order, and and get it by the holidays without any sweat. So it's good. It's like you and I both are entrepreneurs, obviously. I was looking online this week about the offer for the annual subscription on AdFreeShows. I think it's a great idea. And by the way, that's not a bad Christmas gift.
No, it is not. Folks are really excited about what we're doing over at AdFreeShows.com. Of course, you get all these shows early and ad free, even on video. But there's lots of extra bonus content, maybe most famously the Jim Herd interview that everybody wanted to hear and didn't know they wanted to hear. Got great buzz, great traction. And we're continuing to build lots of interactive things. And, we just had a lot of fun at AdFreeShows.com. But yeah, now we're offering a discount if we do an annual and an exclusive collectible. It's a one-off comic book of all of our hosts. So you get to see JR as a superhero and Tony Schiavone as a superhero. It's fun stuff.
Do I have a big package?
Oh, of course, Bubba. Everybody who's ever seen you get a manicure knows that.
God damn, I get heat that's bullshit. Really.
No, every time you post a pedicure.
I took one the other day and I made sure it was only like from the knees down.
No hog.
Yeah. And I got people yelled at me for that. Hey, where's the bulge? Well, it's still there. I just didn't shoot it. God dang. It's just amazing. What a world we live in. I wouldn't have it any other way. God damn. The wrestling fans keep us honest.
Yep.
And they're truthful and they say what they feel. They're uninhibited. And I love that, man. I love that aspect of it. And the only thing you got to make sure is that you just don't take things personally. It's just people making a comment and expressing an opinion.
It is fun though, when you think about it, that all these years later at the tender age of 68, JR's hog meat still got him hanging from the rafters.
God dang. That's so ridiculous. It's funny. That's crazy. So anyway, it's just funny what takes a life of its own, what manifests itself, so to speak. But anyway, things are good though. I got a lot of comments online about a remark you and I made where I mentioned that, as far as I'm concerned, at this point in my life, AEW is my last gig.
Right.
And I meant that. I love working for Tony Khan. He's a whole different ball game. People just don't understand that. The culture at WWE is what it is. It's all Vince related and oriented. And if you're on the Vince's good list, then it's a wonderful thing. If you're not, then it's not so great. Tony Khan's is the same every time you see him. And he's still a fan. He still loves the business.
Right.
He loves talking about the business, telling stories and asking questions. And he has an innate knowledge of things that went on before he was even born. So it's really a fun experience. But I think at my age, be realistic, and as long as my work holds up to acceptable levels, and hopefully better than that, but at least acceptable levels, I don't see any reason to go anywhere else. I just think it's being able to live here on the beach part-time, and it's not as beautiful. Something I've always dreamed about, being a poor ass kid from Eastern Oklahoma that didn't have an indoor toilet until he was in the 4th grade. True story. So I understand sacrifice and growing up, kind of blue collar at best. And it wasn't even a bright blue. It was kind of a dark blue, but that was good. I'm loving what I'm doing. So just like you are, the mortgage business and what a great year to be in the mortgage business.
Yeah, it's worked out, man. It's weird to say you had your best year in your pajamas, but, yeah, it worked out.
Do you wear pajamas, Conrad?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I count t-shirts and like basketball shorts as pajamas for dudes, but am I walking around here like Ward Cleaver? Not so much. But, in the winter, if I'm in house shoes and shorts and a t-shirt, that's kind of my pajama uniform. Like even now today, we're not doing this one on video yet. I got shorts and a hoodie on. No, that didn't make any sense, but I'm in the damn house. So
yeah,
pajamas.
The first, R-rated line on network television was June Cleaver speaking to her husband, Ward Cleaver, and saying, "Gee, Ward, you're a little rough on the beaver last night."
And on that note, let's talk about our topic today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Umaga. This is one of Jim's favorite performers, and if you were paying attention in his era, he would have been one of yours as well. He wasn't with us a long time, but boy, did he make quite the impression. Jim is fond of the phrase, maximize your minutes. And man, Umaga did that. Did he not?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He was a player. Umaga was the prototype in a different era, a different walk of life, shall we say. Would have been a perfect NFL nose tackle, playing defensive line over that center between the guards, somewhere in that neighborhood, and clogging things up. He had amazing athleticism for a guy that big. He was a super heavyweight that had light heavyweight feet, and just was so athletic and good-hearted. I just loved being around him. He was just a big kid and a good dude. And like you said, Conrad, he left us way too early. And it shows you that sometimes when we develop bad habits, no matter what they may be, it could be overeating, it could be smoking, it could be drinking, it could be, pill popping, whatever it may be. At some point in time, if you don't curtail it to some degree, it's going to catch up with you. And it was just a sad, sad time when he passed. But what a neat guy and a hell of a talent, just a hell of a talent. He's the kind of talent that a guy like Bobby Heenan or Jim Cornette or Paul Heyman, if they had him under their wing,
my gosh.
And I'm not knocking Armando Estrada, Armando, at all. But to compare his managerial skills with Heenan and Heyman and Cornette would not be fair.
Yeah, different characters too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where Umaga was one step away from getting that guy and becoming extraordinary as that coveted monster heel in wrestling, a heel that people still a little leery of. That's a big, rugged looking bastard. I don't want to taunt him too much as he's walking to the ring type deal, but a real good guy. I'm glad we're talking about him today. He deserves a look back and memories and things of that nature. So he didn't have a long run, but he had a damn good run.
Let's talk about him. He was, first known to the world as Edward Smith Fatu. He's born March 28th, 1973 in American Samoa. And, his mother was Vera, the sister of Afa and Sika, of course, the wild Samoans. His father was, Solofa Fatu Sr. He grew up with two older brothers, Sam and Solofa, who also worked as professional wrestlers. Not only that, but Umaga was the uncle of the Usos, of course, a cousin of Yokozuna, a cousin of The Rock, a cousin of Rosey, and of course, Roman Reigns. In other words, this really is the Samoan dynasty. Wrestling is in his blood in a major way.
Yeah, that Samoan dynasty thing is not a gimmick. It's real. And I met Afa and Sika back in the Mid-South days. It was just an interesting relationship. They were really interesting guys, a great heel team. And in that territory, in that era, I can't compare it to this era, but heels were genuinely disliked, and a lot of them were feared. And they were a great monster heel tag team, Afa and Sika. And the thing about those guys, they're close, both of them were around that 300-pound mark. And I say this a lot about, great traits of different characters and different, how you're booked. They fed a comeback like they were small. They took bumps. They were great about feeding a comeback and making that babyface look really, really good. And so, but I've known that family since, like I said, Conrad, gosh, that was in the early 80s. So, or maybe earlier, but somewhere in the early 80s, I think. I got connected with that family, and I've been connected ever since, including, recruiting and signing The Rock and things like that. I got lucky there, obviously. Right place, right time. But that DNA meant something. That's what I'm trying to make. All those guys that you just mentioned were players. And of course, The Rock's at the mark. And, I know that people are coveting a Rock versus Roman Reigns match somewhere down the road. I don't know that it will ever happen. There's a chance. It's all up to The Rock. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to him. And if he, his schedule is so crazy and he can't afford to get hurt, he's going to lose millions of dollars. He can't work. Not that he's going to go broke, but nonetheless, he's special. So, and the specialness of those Samoan fellas, if you look at them, look at their wrists and look at their ankles. They have thick wrists. They're wide, heavy bone density, and they have thick ankles. So they're just put together different. And I say that in all due respect. It's not any, and I say a lot of stupid things on TV sometimes, but seriously, their DNA and their genetics are just conducive to combat sports, football, whatever it may be. So
they're big, thick motherfuckers.
Big fan of, pardon me?
They're big, thick motherfuckers.
Yeah, and they're athletic. They can move around. They're not Clydesdales. The only guy that let his weight get in his way was obviously Yoko.
Right.
But other than that, I said this many times, Yokozuna was the most athletic super heavyweight I ever saw. His timing was impeccable. And then you get Umaga, who was smaller, but more athletic, had that extra gear. He could change gears. And all great pro wrestlers have got to have another gear for when they need it. Come back, feeding a comeback, making a comeback, whatever. But he was... Umaga was just an extraordinary, special guy.
We've talked about, some of these insider phrases before, but I don't know that you've ever really explained to some of our younger listeners, what is feeding a comeback? What does that mean?
Well, when the heel gets his heat and he's beat down the babyface, and the babyface, it's time for him or her to make their comeback, to fire up offensively. And give me some extended offensive moves and in their quote unquote comeback. You have to have a villain that can feed the comeback, and feeding the comeback essentially means taking multiple bumps in a quick in a short amount of time. And so you got to be able to get up and down, and you got to be able to fly a little bit. And feeding a comeback is just that. It's when the time is right, and it's time for the babyface to retaliate and get back in the game offensively. You got to have that heel that can take some bumps, change his facial expressions, fly a little bit, but more importantly, get your ass back up so you can do another one. Because most comebacks are not one move comebacks. Then it's not a comeback. Comebacks are multiple moves, and not a specific number, but multiple moves, and that's the mark of a great heel. He's got to be able to feed a comeback. And Umaga, as big as he was so athletic and coordinated that he could feed a comeback as good as any big man I ever saw.
Well, he's going to start training, Umaga that is, under his uncle in 1995. He becomes tag partners with his cousin Matt, who we know as Rosey. This is all happening at the Wild Samoan Professional Wrestling School. We should mention in 95, with this training complete, he debuts for his uncle Alpha's WXW World Extreme Wrestling promotion. It's a Florida-based independent that holds events across the United States and even a few in Japan, I believe. They work shows for Alpha in Allentown, and he even had a very brief run in 96 with the WWF. They were signed to contracts, and Umaga spent several years based out of Cincinnati with Matt as a tag team. He had tremendous agility, speed, and endurance for his size. Kim Wood, an assistant coach with the Cincinnati Bengals at the time, remarked upon seeing him work some Les Thatcher shows that somehow he must have slipped through the system, because a guy of that size and agility should be in the NFL.
There you go. Kim Wood's also the guy that directed Brian Pillman to my attention, and we brought Brian into WCW. Brian was a former Cincinnati Bengal, grew up in Cincinnati. Kim Wood was a big influence to Brian. So, but I'm saying that, so I said earlier, Umaga was Eki, as a lot of people called him, his nickname, he was perfect for that role as a hand in the dirt, down lineman. But, the wrestling business had a hold of him, literally and figuratively. And that's where he ended up. But Kim Wood's right on the money on that evaluation.
Talk to me a little bit about Developmental in Cincinnati. That's something we haven't spent a lot of time talking about.
Well, we believed in my run as the head of talent relations that we could not continue to keep recycling older talents.
Right.
They had a place, but they're not the building blocks that they were when they were younger. They can contribute to the success of the brand, but they don't need to be the focal point entirely. You've got to build with youth and new and things like that. Wrestling fans love new ideas. They love new characters. They love all that stuff. So we needed training grounds. The territories have evaporated by and large. So we set up a training camp in Cincinnati with Les Thatcher, who's a phenomenal coach and teacher, very skilled and a good man. And he taught wrestling the right way. He taught about character and coming to work on time and being a total pro, et cetera, et cetera. So we did that. And then we'd have spot shows around Cincinnati. So those kids could work in front of a paying audience. It might be 50 people.
Right.
But at least they're there. They paid their money to get in, as opposed to just, here's a freebie. So we had Cincinnati, we had Memphis, and we had Louisville. I also had a little relationship with UPW, I think it was called, with Rick Bassman out there in Southern California. That's where I got Sting. That's where I got John Cena. But Sting actually trained there. And then he trained there, and then he teamed with Warrior, and they went to Memphis, and then they came to Mid-South. So UPW produced some really good talents for us. And then, I got Cena from there. That's where I saw Cena work and got to know John, and then I signed him. McMahon thought I was too effusive about signing Cena. I said, I signed a guy yesterday, Vince, that's going to headline WrestleMania in less than 5 years. His response to me was, you need to go home and take a shower, because I took a red eye back. I hadn't been home. I came straight to work. That's really good. I thought, well, he'd say, good job, JR. I said, whatever, something positive. Nah, go home, take a shower, and come back to work. Okay. So, but we had those developmental areas, and to get talent to develop.
Right.
And of course, the most famous group was that group that we sent to OVW with Lesnar and Cena, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin. There's one more too in that group, but that was an all-star cast. That was one of those recruiting classes like Nick Saban gets every year. They're all 5-star guys type thing. So, but Cincinnati did a good job. I think Al Snow worked there some, helped Les, but Les was the head coach.
Right.
And just did a great job. Les still around, and I followed him on Twitter and Facebook. He's a wonderful man, really is. So that was kind of the deal. We just knew we had to develop new stars. We had to give guys, even if guys were not going to be in the 4-hole spot like a baseball for the cleanup hitter, you got to have a lineup, and you got to have guys that has good skill sets. And we knew that fundamentally speaking, that Les Thatcher was going to accomplish that for us with these kids that we were sending there.
Let's talk about what we're doing next. As we said, he's going to be teaming with his cousin Matt. They're going to form a tag team as both the Samoan Gangstas and the Island Boys. In 2001, Umaga, along with his cousin Matt, do join the WWF. They're assigned to the Heartland Wrestling Association, the HWA, which we just talked about, Les Thatcher's group there. They're going to use the Island Boys name here, with the names being ECMO. So Umaga is going to go known as ECMO here. They do win that promotion's tag titles in November of 2001, defeating a couple of former WCW talents, Evan Courageous and Shannon Moore, who used to be part of 3 Count. They also work for Memphis Championship Wrestling and hold those tag straps a few times. Why initially if you had to guess, was Umaga positioned as a tag team wrestler? Was it just based on the heritage of the Wild Samoans, or was it more based on his size and perhaps, if his stamina wasn't there, this is a way to, camouflage that a little bit?
I don't think it was a stamina issue. I really don't. I think it was a traditional thing that first statement he made. Often Seeker was cast such a large, prominent shadow as one of the all-time great tag teams in pro wrestling. I mean, they filled their role as the monster heel tag team as good as anybody could. So I think that there was something about, trying to, recreate the past, and create the new wild Samoans, in lack of a better term. So I think that's what it was. It certainly wasn't, Rosey may have had some conditioning issues because of his size, and he had some health issues, as we know. We found out later. But Umaga his gas tank never got emptied very often. I never seen him blow up. And back when I was booking the house shows and signing talents and so forth, you get a good talent would come to you and say, man, either way, man, I love working with you, Umaga. Anytime you can book me with him on the road, I'd love it, type deal. Or it's the other side of the issue, man, JR, he's hard. He's hard to work with. He blows up, type deal. Whatever the excuse was or the reason was. But I never heard that negativity regarding Umaga. The talents generally loved to work with him. He didn't kill you, but he looked like he was. And if you're a babyface and it came your time to get back in the game and comeback time, he was there for you. He didn't lay around on the mat and take an hour to get up. He was down and up, down and up. It's just, he had great agility and stamina, coordination. So I would think it's probably the precedent that was set by Alpha and Sika that WWF at that time was seeking to replicate.
Well, they get their wish on July 22nd, 2002. Umaga is going to use the name Jamal, and his cousin Matt is going to use the name Rosey. And they're going to make their main roster debut on this July 22nd, 2002 episode of Raw as 3-minute warning. A pair of thugs. I guess they're the enforcers for Eric Bischoff, and they're going to attack random wrestlers each week. And of course, the gimmick. Bischoff gives them 3 minutes to entertain him, or here they come. And they smash a lot of folks here, including Lillian Garcia, former wrestlers Jimmy Snuka, even Mae Young, Fabulous Moolah. But maybe the most notable event, and boy, this is regrettable in hindsight, is when Eric ordered 3-minute warning to attack, quote unquote, the lesbians. Boy, this is a weird time for creative, is it not?
Yeah, it's the attitude era, man. Everything goes. The more coarse, the better at times. At least it would seem that way. So yeah, it was just that part. Look, you and I were talking about your friend Shuley of the Howard Stern Show, who now lives in Huntsville, right?
Yes, sir.
I think a lot of the boldness of the Howard Stern Show was largely an impetus for kicking off the Attitude Era.
No doubt.
And I think Howard's creativity and his staff's creativity and creating all these characters and these oddities and the freaks of nature and, all these, the
Whack Pack.
Whack Pack. Exactly. That's what I was trying to think of. I think it kind of bled over into the early stages of the Attitude Era. And then once the Attitude Era started getting over and people like that R-rated pro wrestling, then you just took it from there. But I think Howard Stern's influence, his show's creativity with the oddities and so forth and so on, was a big part of what we were doing back in that glory years.
In September, we see 3-minute warning start a feud with Billy and Chuck. Probably their most memorable moment is when they crash the commitment ceremony. Boy, some of this stuff is a little silly, but
yeah.
They're in good storylines right away. That they've got, sure, they may not have a traditional place on the roster, but they're positioned with the general manager and they're in key storylines. And, anytime, even though we may not like the authority figure concept because it's been outdone or overdone rather at this point, when you come in and make a debut attached to a character like that, you're going to be on TV, right?
Right. Exactly. And it was all shock. Howard Stern's the greatest shock in the history of radio by far. I don't know who's left. Who's second is another another topic for another day. But, that was, it was shock. The 3-minute warning was a shock deal. And the irony of it was they started getting over as baby faces because people knew that they're going to see some shit go down. And you can't screw too many things up in the short times that they were out there. They're just so big and mobile, they could make a Samoan drop look like it was absolutely murder. So, that all that was based on shock principle, knee jerk. And luckily we had some talents also in that era that could wrestle really well and do good long matches if necessary. But the show has got to be heavy on talk, heavy on skits, heavy on vignettes, things of that nature. So that was just a part of the Attitude Era. And quite frankly, those guys are a big part of the Attitude Era. We saw that Eki was going to be a star, without a doubt. He just had the attitude, and he had the makeup, physical and mental makeup. Sometimes I love Rosey, God bless his soul. He was almost too nice a guy to be a heel. He just didn't have that mean streak. His brother, Roman, has got a mean streak. Roman did play defensive tackle in college at Georgia Tech. He understands that whole team concept and that structured environment that it takes to be a D1 football player. But Rosey came basically. He was always for him was always going to be wrestling. And so, but we knew Eki was going to be special. Just, you always worry about guys that are that big, Conrad, just keeping them motivated and keeping them aware of the nutrition so they don't eat themselves like William Perry did back in the day out of a job.
Well, what's interesting to me is, and we're not done talking about 3-minute warning, but the team lasts less than a year, but what an impression they made. I mean, I feel like everybody I know knows this team, and that's not something you usually talk. I mean, usually when you're talking about a team like this, it's a team that had a run for years, not a team that made it less than 1 year, but boy, they really knew how to make an impact. And, they were, the stuff they were written in, they did a great job with. And we talked about a little bit, they're going to have a bit of a feud with Chuck and Billy here. Eventually Rico becomes the manager for 3-minute warning. And I don't know that I necessarily needed that creative. I thought Rico did a much better pair with Chuck and Billy. It does seem a little random, but maybe that's why it worked. Maybe that's why Vince liked it. What'd you think of Rico being with 3-minute warning?
I thought he was overbooked. Rico's I think he's still, he was a Las Vegas cop. I saw him, pardon me, out there, maybe the last cauliflower club I attended or something. A sweetheart of a guy. But you earmark this team that has this apparently unlimited potential with a manager that isn't going to get over. And so all of a sudden they're the way the opportunity for growth is limited. So sometimes that happens. And it's the same thing as we were talking about earlier. Armando did a good job with Umaga, the Samoan bulldozer, he called him. But Armando wasn't those other three guys I used as illustrations, Heyman, and Cornette. If you put Eki with those guys, any of those guys, if you were able to, then it's a whole different perception of what people would think about Umaga. So that's just a thought. It sounds like I'm denigrating Armando, and I'm not. He was a good company guy, loyal. He reliable. Big trait for me. You got to be reliable. You can't play on the team, and he was that for sure. So, but we knew Eki was going to be. You just can't find guys like that, Conrad. That's like seeing Leon White for the first time. Vader. He's athletic as hell. He was doing moonsaults. I don't know why. A babyface spot, but he was a monster heel that could do all that shit. And he wanted everybody to know he could do all that stuff. But he had great feet, great athleticism. He could get up, he could get down, and especially in the early days, before his body started breaking down on him. because he got too heavy. He got that 400-pound mark, and man, you're gambling with, flirting with disaster with that. So, but Eki was always going to be special. You just can't find somebody with his traits and his size, his look. They don't grow on trees.
He does get a little bit of heat. Jamal gains a reputation for being reckless in the ring, including several performers who were complaining, maybe most notably the October 14th situation when Pat Patterson suffers a separated shoulder. The rumor and innuendo, and Lord knows we get a lot of that in wrestling, says that the WWE decided to punish him and put him on the receiving end of a stink face by his real life brother Rikishi during the Royal Rumble match.
I think that's a load of horse shit.
Of course, that's a little silly, but do you remember there being discussions about, hey, big boy, y'all gotta slow down. Y'all are hurting guys for real out there.
Well, we had that conversation with a lot of guys. You don't think the conversation with the Steiners didn't occur in the WCW because they were so physical and violent?
Of course.
It happens all the time. So they were big, aggressive guys. And because of their size, they could easily hurt you if they weren't extremely careful. And if you you weren't in position to take the bump. So I think that's just bullshit. You know, taking a stink face that's punishment. It's probably one of the bigger pops of the night.
Exactly.
And guys love to work for the pops and as they should. But no, I think that's just that rumor and innuendos. That's weak rumor and innuendo to me, because I was there. I don't recall there being an issue. The issue was slow down a little bit, fellas. Be a little bit more careful. Your job is to take care of your opponent. They were so motivated to get over, and they were getting a break. They were on WWF television. They wanted to follow the footsteps of their relatives and those that preceded them. So they were overzealous. They're motivated. Goddamn, I'd love to have somebody like that. As somebody you got to continually let a fire into their big ass. They want to go play. So we just had to get them slow down a little bit and make sure they understood that when you get in the ring, your job is to protect your opponents.
Right.
And simple as that. And they came around to that. So, you know, it's just going to happen with big guys like that.
Let's talk about the end of the run here. We mentioned that 3-minute warning lasts just less than a year. Umaga winds up being released from his contract in June of 2003, reportedly after his involvement in a bar fight. The newsletters would say that details were sketchy, but the reports were that he had possibly roughed up some police officers during the incident. I think this has become a legendary story. I'm sure you had some paperwork involved with all this. What do you remember?
I remember very little, to be honest with you. I don't think it was as big a deal as the newsletters wanted to bracket it as such. Scuffle in a bar. God, that's sure unusual for pro wrestlers. Having a scuffle in a bar. It's not unusual for my redneck friends in Oklahoma. They'd have them every damn weekend with somebody. That's where when you get in that environment, man. I tell our guys, sometimes they don't understand. I told them, you're not the alpha male.
Right.
That bar is already somebody else's territory. And when you try to become and elbow your way into the alpha male category of this specific bar, it ain't going to float real well. That's why going to these bars, especially going alone, makes no sense. It's ridiculous. I'd rather them go to their room and smoke a joint, order a pizza, watch a movie, and go to sleep. Well, that ain't any fun. Well, hey, I've had fun smoking dope and eating pizza and watching movies. You can do that. You know, you really can. But it keeps you out of harm's way, so to speak. And the younger guys are full of piss and vinegar and adrenaline, and, you know, testosterone is flowing freely, and their body's still making a lot of testosterone. They don't see those as limitations. They're going to go into that bar and become the alpha male. If I want to play pool, I'm going to take over the table. If I want somebody's girlfriend to sit with me, that's what I'm going to try to accomplish. It's just not wise. So I obviously remembered about it. And I remembered us having to make it, you know, remove Umaga from the roster. But it's just a matter of, you know, accumulation of little things that would limit somebody staying long term until they matured a little bit more and they got it. They got why you're on the team and what your role clearly is defined as. So I don't remember the fight being so I don't know if there's any lawsuits or anything like that. If they've been really serious, you can bet your ass the cop would have sued, and Umaga would have gone to jail for an extended length of time. I don't recall that happening. So, but in that era, that wasn't unusual for guys to get in scuffles. That's why guys, the Watts had his rule. You lose a street fight to a civilian, your ass is fired. Well, when, and our guys were smart enough to know in that Louisiana crazy land sometimes, they didn't go alone. You'd have Hacksaw Duggan and Dr. Death and Ray Fernandez, Hercules Fernandez, and all these other cats, Buzz Sawyer. We have some guys that are badasses, Steiners. They go together to a bar. Now it's a different deal.
Yeah.
Because there's strength in numbers. So they can't be isolated. And nobody's that stupid or that drunk, at least more often than not, to challenge those guys physically. And they knew what was at stake. You're going to go chase the girls and you're going to go to the bar and you're going to have a few drinks, whatever. Understand the downside of this deal. If you get into an issue and you embarrass the company by getting your ass whipped, you're out of here. I'm not going to tolerate it. That's the Cowboys' view. So anyway, that's a little sidebar there, but nonetheless, that's kind of what I think. I don't think that was as big a deal. That fight was as big a deal as it was made out to be, just in my memory. And I went back and I researched it all, and I could go back to some old files and things, but I don't have that access right now. But anyway, I think that's what that was.
This past weekend, I hosted some of my friends down at the beach when we had a little surprise party for my buddy Cassio Kid. And I made sure that I got Cassio exactly what he needed just in time for summer. I'm talking about some shorts from Chubbies. That's right. The swim trunks that just keep on giving. You're going to look good. You're going to feel good. Cassio didn't take his off all weekend. This is a home run gift. I found this out last year for Father's Day. I hooked my dad up with some Chubbies. And every time I go over to the house, even in the winter, he's still rocking them because they're super comfortable. They're original stretch shorts. Man, you just can't beat it. They've got the elastic waistband and it comes in 3 different lengths. Some guys like to rock it like the Jerry West shorts. Some want the LeBron shorts. You know what I'm talking about. But they've also got the classic line swim trunk. Man, Cassio didn't take his off all weekend. He absolutely loved it. You will too. They even got like really comfortable Friday shirts. I want to recommend that to you. Super lightweight, super comfortable. Chubbies is a lifestyle apparel brand that I think has no equivalent in all of human history. We're talking the most comfortable clothing and the most unique designs ever. And it's near impossible to wear them without being filled with that sense of life. Life is truly beautiful and it's awe-inspiring mystery and there's no fixed destination. So why not look and feel good along the way? All right, seriously, Chubbies offers a huge variety of high-quality men's apparel. They got super stretchy shorts that are super comfortable. They've got swim trunks in 3 inseam lengths. They got your pants. They got your polos, the button-down shirts. Everything you need is at Chubbies. And by the way, you're going to run into people who are going to say, hey, you're rocking Chubbies. Like, this is like a movement. And I think it's because, as guys, we know there's a difference between looking good and feeling good. A lot of times, well, I can speak from personal experience. When my wife picks something out for me to wear, hey, it might look good on me, but does it feel good? Am I really comfortable? Chubbies checks both of the boxes. Hey, and would you look at that? For a limited time, folks, our friends at Chubbies are giving our listeners 20% off with the promo code JR at checkout. That's at chubbyshorts.com. You'll get 20% off your order with the promo code JR. Support our show and tell them we sent you. Don't just blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubbies. That's chubbyshorts.com. Use our promo code JR at checkout. You'll get 20% off your order. That's 20% off your order with our promo code JR at chubbyshorts.com.
Talk to me a little bit about who ultimately makes the decision. Is this something that Vince just tasks you with? Jim, figure out how to protect us here. Or does he come to you and say, God damn, Jim, we gotta, if we can't solve this problem, we gotta eliminate it. Go ahead and tell him to get his shit together and we'll try to bring him back down the line, but that's it. Do you ultimately make the call to let him go, or does Vince do it? And who actually delivers the news to him?
Me. I would deliver the news. try to do it in person when you can. It's not, it's not a letter. I'll call, talk, you actually had a conversation about it, but Vince would earmark it. And sometimes it was brought up by others in the company, well, this guy's putting our company in jeopardy and he's out of control and he can't control his habits, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you get all these little indications, like I said earlier, that small things start accumulating, and cumulatively it's bad business. And so he would say, we got to fix this problem. And he said, unless you can tell me differently, JR, the only way I know to fix it is to let him go and let him mature. And, cause we'd sure as hell like to bring him back. We knew he was going to be great, but you still can't make exceptions with somebody that you perceive to be out of control and dangerous, especially that big, that strong. And so, we had to, and he understood, look, Eki understood that. He knew he fucked up. And he took the bat out of our hands. What are we going to do now? So that's kind of what that was, Connie. I think that he was, he knew he had fucked up. It's time you got to pay the piper sometimes. And that's the only recourse that we had.
Knowing you like I do, I know that you wouldn't have just said, Eki, sorry, but this is just something we can't let pass. So we're going to have to let you go and hang up the phone. You would have continued to talk through and tried to end on a positive note where, now here's what you can do to get back, or here's what we'd like to see. Here's how we'd like to approach this in the future with you, or catch you down the road, whatever. We know he's going to bounce around a little bit. He's going to do some stuff with TNA. He's going to do some stuff with All Japan. He's even going to work some New Japan. I mean, he's all over the place, and ultimately he does come back. What sort of words of wisdom do you give to Eki when you're letting him go about, hey, this is not goodbye forever. This is see you later?
Well, it was just that we have to make a change, Eki, and unfortunately it's going to cost you your job. Now, you're going to get plenty of offers to go work, and I'm certainly not going to infer that we don't want you to come back, but we got to see change. You got to get under control, and you got to, this is not a outlaw territory. It's not a bunch of indie dates. This is the real shit here. This is the big time. I said, so it's going to be up the guy you see in the mirror. If you make some changes and get your life under control and take care of your family, which the Samoan people really have always had that mantra, family, family, family. It's really pleasant, quite frankly. So, I gave him hope. You don't want to leave the conversation negative. No yelling and screaming. I've had some yelling and screaming issues with guys over the years, and I just cut the conversation off. We're done. We're not doing anything constructive right now. You're mad at me for something you did that I had to deliver the bad news. That ain't fair to me, and it's not me. You're not being honest with yourself. Eki was not that guy. He was very emotional. He was very upset, but I gave him hope that Eki, you could be a huge star here. You might be the biggest star in the entire Samoan family, because you got skills that nobody else has got. And of course, then Rock came along and that kind of took that spot. But anyway, yeah, we had a good conversation. You always want to leave it better. You appreciate their efforts. You appreciate being on the team. Thanks for all your contributions. But we've got some issues here that we can't address with you on the roster. You got to get better at what you do and how you live your life, how you conduct yourself. And going to a bar or doing this, that, and the other, spending your money in a silly way is not smart for a guy with 2 young kids and a wife. They get it. You just got to be reasonable. And if you yell, something I would do about Vince. I told guys this all the time. I told you, you don't confront the old man. You converse with him. If you converse, you might get what you need. If you confront, you ain't getting shit.
I like that. Converse, don't confront. Let's talk about Umaga's return. December of 2005. Guess what? He's re-signed. He's back with WWE. We have to know how this happened. Had he just done a good job, outside? Was there a creative need for a return of 3-minute warning? Because I do believe that was the original plan. I was talking to Armando Estrada getting ready for this show, and he says, when Eddie was rehired in late 2005, the plan was to pair him back with Rosey to reform 3 Minute Warning. I was flown into Raw in Hershey, PA for a tryout in January of 06. I didn't have a contract and had just started doing the Armando gimmick in OVW. I had no idea what the tryout was for, but I'd heard rumblings they might want me to be a manager. I'd never met Rosey or Jamal up until the moment I entered the pre-tape room with Brooklyn Brawler. I had a few minutes to prepare a promo about how I would lead this tag team to the heights of WWE. I did a couple of promos and felt like I nailed it. Thanked everybody for the opportunity and flew home. And 3 days later, I got a call from Johnny Ace saying Vince wants you on TV as soon as possible. They offered him a contract and he verbally accepted. And the plan was for him to manage Rosey and Jamal, but the office wanted Rosey to come to OVW to work on his conditioning. And he even shot an angle on OVW TV in February 06 saying he had a new surprise coming. Well, eventually he got a call from Michael Hayes saying, you and Jamal are starting the night after Mania and we're putting the rocket up your asses. Be ready to go. So it feels like there's a gear shift here where maybe we wanted 3 Minute Warning, but when we actually took a look at him, we thought, Rosey probably needs to drop some LBs before he's ready for prime time. What else can we do? How did we create this Umaga character and pivot here?
Well, again, he had proven in meetings and conversations that he'd matured, he'd settled down, and he still had those amazing physical gifts. He had everything that we talked about here. We saw great potential. You just get his head where you want it, or he needs it to be, is what you're looking for. It's all a mental thing at this point, because physically he had everything you could ever want for a monster heel.
Right.
So I think that's where that was. And I think that, we could see that, of the two guys, of Rosey and Eddie, Eki, that they were, Eki was a star. He was young and big and mobile, believable. Just got to keep him under control and have him make good decisions when he's not in the ring. And even when he's in the ring, don't take any unnecessary chances that might hurt somebody. So that was a situation. It's just, if you saw him in the young Umaga, you just said, God damn, this is, Vince and I talked about that before. I said, God damn, your dad would love this guy, because he had been a great opponent for Bruno. He's one of those monster heels that could give him, Bruno could have got multiple main events out of in the Garden. So back when that's how the formula worked, he's perfect. So it's just a matter, can we get him mentally in the right frame of mind? And that's part of the job of talent relations.
It's pretty remarkable to see that, he does get the opportunity and knowing what he's going to do on the other side. And I think some of our listeners probably didn't even realize that Umaga was part of 3 Minute Warning. That's how different the characters are. It is more of a return, I guess, to the more traditional Samoan look, but boy, the presentation is going to be different. He debuts on April 3rd, 2006, right after WrestleMania. It's the same name of the final and most painful part of the Samoan tattooing process, meaning the end. I didn't know that until I did a little research on Umaga, but the name meaning the most painful part of the Samoan tattoo, and that it really means the end. Dude, that's pretty cool. Umaga, the end.
Yeah, it worked. All the pieces started coming together. The missing piece was, can we be assured that Umaga is prepared for this opportunity? You're going to be making more money than you ever dreamed you'd make. You're going to be on your own, nobody to tag. And so it was just, is everything going to be cool? God, hell, that, we think back, and we'll talk about this in a moment. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much, but in 2007 at WrestleMania 23, and I remember that because that's the year that Lawler and I both went in the Hall of Fame with Dusty and Mr. Perfect and the Samoans, ironically. Mr. Fuji, good class, fun class. But he was a part of a match that was one of the most, I think it was a record-setting WrestleMania number, because that's the show that had Trump and McMahon on it, and the battle of the billionaires and the hair versus hair. So he had some memorable moments without a doubt.
Let's also mention the presentation here. He's 6'4". He's billed as being 6'4", 360 pounds. He's got some dreadlocks. He's got the tribal face paint. He's got a tattoo of Samoa across his stomach. We've seen, especially in more recent years, as we've celebrated The Undertaker, back in the day, creative services would have somebody do sketches of these different characters. How does that, this feels like, okay, just put the old tights on like your old man used to do, blah, blah, blah. Was there a creative services component here, or do you think it's just a simple conversation?
No, there was, drawings and, suggestions. We wanted to repackage Umaga, and creative services was a very viable component of that repackaging as far as logos, action figures, all the little details, and the tattoos. Nowadays you talk about a tattoo, everybody's got tattoos.
Right.
And everybody comes out with their hair wet and tattoos, and it's all same for a lot of guys. Back in those days, those tribal tattoos were somewhat unique. So we had a very distinctive look, and creative services had a hand in how to package that, capture that, and then market it.
This is obviously this story is going to take a few twists and turns, but I do think that, there's a lot of good in this story. You think about this. This guy is a part of a tag team, has a pretty decent run. Less than a year in, he's let go because of outside of the ring activities. And, it's not too terribly long. He's not only back, but he's coming back with a monster push, not as a tag team, but solo. It's a pretty cool story. And, they're going to get over this Samoan Spike as a finishing maneuver. It's an interesting choice, Jim, because, there had been so many sort of high impact moments with 3 Minute Warning and with the Samoan bulldozer and this big guy. You just assume, he's going to do a big power move. I don't know, a power slam or something. But the Samoan Spike, this is kind of cool. We hadn't seen a lot of this in WWE.
That was an old Terry Gordy finish. They called it the Oriental Spike, that, Terry allegedly picked up while he was wrestling in Japan. And then he used that finish. You always look for a finish that you can utilize on anybody. So, the Samoan Spike could be taken by anybody, a wrestler, a referee, ring announcer, TV announcer, whatever, without killing them. And it's just a matter of how it was sold. But I thought that finish was really good. Ernie Ladd used a version of that same basic thing because Ernie would tape his thumb up, and somehow that gave him a little additional sizzle, a little extra oomph. But it wasn't a new hold, but the name of the Samoan Spike was kind of creative. And again, it would work on anybody. So that's what you look for in that situation. You can't have a finish where, your finish is a part of the finish of a military press. Somebody's not going to military press Umaga. Sorry, ain't going to happen. So, but the Samoan Spike that Umaga did use was universal. It worked for anybody that he worked with.
Let's mention too, he's got a new manager here. We alluded to it before, Armando Estrada, and boy, did he get that over. The guy who played the character is, as we mentioned, coming up from OVW. He was trained to be a wrestler. Now he's a manager. The gimmick here with this Estrada character is he's a Cuban businessman from a family that exploited its ties to Fidel Castro to live a life of luxury, while the rest of Havana, including his extended family, lived in poverty. And he's getting himself over in a way where it probably is not the initial plan, but fans love the way he would introduce himself and roll the R's and have the quick little laugh. He does it enough to where he starts to get cheered, even though he's managing a bad guy and he himself is a heel. And of course he eventually stops introducing himself that way. His middle name is removed. It's one of those where, he was so invested in it that he made it work almost too well. Or did maybe the company not even consider, hey man, this might actually get cheered?
No, we didn't think about getting cheered, to be honest with you. At least I didn't. But he did it so well, and it was entertaining. He was kind of a comedic character.
Yeah.
He wasn't the Gary Hart menacing manager.
Right.
He was more lighthearted and more just didn't come off as a mean person. And his stuff was entertaining, and the rolling the R's was comedic. So it started getting over, and then all of a sudden you find yourself swimming upstream because the manager of your number one killer heel is getting cheered or laughed at or laughed with, whatever you want to say. So tweaks had to be made, but that's not unusual in our business where things evolve and change and so forth and are refined. And the greatest audience, the greatest measuring stick you got, the greatest marketing tool you have is the live audience. That's why right now with no audiences to speak of, we had a great crowd last night, but it's exception to the rule. That live audience, missing that live audience, sitting there experiencing pro wrestling in person is so missed. But I think the audience got, they would roll the R's with him and became an audience participation thing. And it's just probably not the thing you're looking for from the guy that's managing your top heel.
Let's also mention that we've got a pretty big moment here coming. April 3rd, 2006, as we said, Allstate Arena in Chicago. It is the Raw after WrestleMania. Umaga's going to make his debut, but here's how it happens. Estrada picks a fight with the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, telling him he's too old to be in the business. And then Umaga attacks Ric Flair in his debut at the orders of Estrada. It's kind of interesting. He makes his in-ring TV debut on April 10th from Milwaukee, defeating a guy known as Chris Guy. Of course, these days we know him as Colt Cabana. How fun is that? That one of his first matches as Umaga is beating Colt Cabana.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Funny how things like that are retraceable.
Yeah.
And discoverable, so to speak. Well, Colt's a solid hand, no doubt about that. He knew where to be and when to be there. But, starting off with an issue with Flair, I think just signified to the audience that WWF is serious about this big son of a gun, and he's already knocked off the Nature Boy.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Listen, Shelton Benjamin is a beloved figure by this point in the company, but debuting against Shelton compared to debuting against Ric Flair, no comparison. He's going to ultimately defeat Flair at Backlash on April 30th in Lexington. He gets a win in just like 3 minutes with the Samoan Spike. So not only is he beating Flair, he's beating him quick. And after this, he lays waste to pretty much the whole roster of Raw. He's got a feud going against, of all people, Eugene. And during that time, he beats up Viscera, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, at Vengeance 06 in Charlotte, the event that's best known for when DX returned. Umaga crushed Eugene, who had Doink, Hacksaw, and Kamala in his corner. On July 17th at the AT&T Center in San Antonio, Umaga actually pinned John Cena after the Samoan Spike. And on the July 31st Raw from East Rutherford, New Jersey, he picks up perhaps an even more rare win, a victory over Shawn Michaels. You want to talk about a vote of confidence? Hey buddy, we're going to start you going over Flair. And then this summer we'll let you beat John Cena. A couple weeks later, we'll even let you beat Shawn Michaels. My goodness. What a push.
Yeah. Push. We all love the push. Can you believe the most inscripted autograph I've done on Under the Black Hat, that we sign at jrsbarbecue.com is something that has to do with the push. The push has gotten over and people will have fun with it, so forth and so on. But Umaga had fun with his push because here's the thing. He saw that Vince was very serious about pushing him. He knew that if the rocket ship remained attached, as Michael Hayes indicated earlier, that he was going to make a lot of money, and he did make a lot of money. He did really, really well. But he saw that the old man was committed to the character. You don't feed Umaga all these guys that we just mentioned if you're not serious. So it all worked, and of course then it led to WrestleMania in 2007.
His next feud starts at SummerSlam. He's supposed to be an enforcer on behalf of Vince and Shane. only to be attacked by Kane as he's making his entrance. So Umaga would feud with Kane for the next 2 months until Umaga wins a loser leaves Raw match on the October 9th episode of Raw, which would get rid of Kane, at least on Raw. So after being separated by different brands, they have one final match at Cyber Sunday where Umaga again beats Kane. Umaga at this point has still not been pinned, and he's deemed the number one contender for the WWE Championship and put in a feud with the champ, John Cena, for the title. And Cena would retain his belt at New Year's Revolution. He pinned Umaga with a roll up, which officially ended his undefeated streak, which I believe lasted 34 televised matches and went all the way from April of 06 to January of 07. He did suffer some losses by DQ and double countouts, but not pinned, not submitted. And then it happens on pay-per-view. That's sort of old school, but I like it. Let's give a guy a streak, give him a world title shot. And if he's going to finally lose, he should lose to the champion. Right, Jim?
Yeah, it wasn't 50-50 booking. It was the deal where I'm sure fans have recognized this for a long time, that, your guy goes over and then he gets beat up. The babyface slips over the heel with an inside cradle or something along those lines, or a roll up, whatever it may be. And then they get the 1, 2, 3, that guy kicks out at 3.5. And then the guy that won the match gets the shit beat out of him. We got to give him something back. I say bullshit on that one. That's uncreative, lazy ass booking. It doesn't kill you to lose.
Right.
It just doesn't. Now, I will say, on the other hand of that, which make me sound hypocritical, that momentum and winning and coming out on the good side, like Umaga did for almost a year, is sensible. Makes a lot of sense. But man, oh man, he had that streak going. He had momentum. Is my point. Momentum is it. So that's important. And even though WWE did not do wins and loss records to any degree, as we do in AEW, which we think makes sense, it makes a logical booking. You can have a cold match if a guy's ranked number 5, this guy's ranked number 3. The everyday Joe can understand 3 versus 5.
Right.
I wish we had some 3 versus 5 matchups in football more often. It's just not the case. But it makes sense in the grand scheme of things. It's understandable. It's transferable. Audience will get it. So, but him getting that momentum's a big thing. That's the key of this whole diatribe. Momentum. And Vince facilitated Umaga getting momentum. And so then Umaga did the rest. He was convincing, and he fulfilled the role that he was outlined to fulfill.
We should mention, for the rest of the month, Armando is going to play down John Cena's victory, claiming it was a fluke. And then they set up a last man standing rematch. It's set for Royal Rumble. And on an episode between the two pay-per-views, Umaga attacks John Cena and causes a quote unquote worked injury to his spleen, and put the match in jeopardy. Of course, this gives John Cena a new wrinkle. He's going to refuse a medical exam because he's concerned that the results of that could cost him to forfeit the title. So he's going to press on without the medical exam and a damaged spleen. He ultimately defeats Umaga at the Royal Rumble after wrapping a loosened ring rope around his neck during an STFU. Boy, this is super creative. A lot of fans still remember this spot. Anytime one of the ring ropes comes loose and is used, it's a pretty rare thing. And to see it used in a submission hold here, it showed that John Cena was willing to do whatever it took to win, and maybe added a more hardened edge to his character. But it also showed what a badass that Umaga was, that, hey, you may have beat him, but you needed to use the ring ropes to choke him to do so.
Yeah, it was a good finish. Very creative. It checked all the boxes. It gave Umaga the proverbial out that seems to be prevalent when booking a match of this nature. You got to maintain. You got to protect the asset, all the while the asset is losing, and that's easily done. That could be facilitated. And in this case, as you pointed out, Conrad, it was facilitated by using the ring rope. and the hold itself is STFU is devastating enough. But then when you wrap the ring rope around the guy's neck and all that good stuff, it adds a little bit of drama and a little bit of uniqueness to it. So, and it protected Umaga to a good degree. And that's really largely too up to the announcers. Announcers have got to make sure that they point out that, like you said, even though Cena won, look what it took to get that victory. And this situation could possibly be far from over because Umaga is, he has Cena in his crosshairs. But that was a good deal. And another reason that, he got the big push. At some point in time, you want to get him ready for your top babyface. And in that era, the top babyface was John Cena. So the WWF did a good job of setting the table for that match, and then came up, wouldn't be surprised that wasn't a Pat Patterson finish, and then set that up for that Royal Rumble. So it was a high-profile match, big event, main event, and it just so unique that it worked.
We've got a vote of confidence here from Vince McMahon. Usually it's whoever wins the Royal Rumble or whoever's leaving the Rumble as the champ. They're going to be the people figured in a big way for WrestleMania. Vince doesn't need that for Umaga. He names Umaga his representative for the Battle of the Billionaires with I guess, what would become the President of the United States, Donald Trump, at WrestleMania 13 or 23,
amazing.
Rather.
Is that amazing or what, Conrad?
It feels make believe. Immediately after choosing Umaga, McMahon grants him a match against the Intercontinental Champion, Jeff Hardy, which he won to take the title. So now Umaga is not only going to be in a prime spot on WrestleMania, he's the Intercontinental Champion, beating Jeff Hardy. And after Bobby Lashley is named as Trump's representative, the two began a feud which even lasts beyond WrestleMania. On the March 12th edition of Raw, The Rock would have a pre-taped promo shown to the arena where he talked about this Trump-McMahon feud, and he endorses Lashley and Trump. And he says Umaga in Samoan actually means shriveled up monkey penis, which is kind of a fun thing.
That's a Brian Gewirtz line. Brian Gewirtz was a MVP boy. I'll tell you that. He helped Rock. He'd get in the Rock's head and feed ideas. And then Dwayne was so creative and processed the information so intelligently that he would expand on Brian's rough ideas and Ryan's jump start. But Brian Gewirtz was a big unsung hero in that era, especially as it relates to Rock, and he still works for Rock.
WrestleMania 23, 80,103 announced fans. Umaga is going to lose the Battle of the Billionaire hair versus hair match. He's going to take a stunner from Stone Cold. And of course, because Umaga lost, the stipulation means Vince McMahon has to get his head shaven. This is a pretty memorable moment in WWE history for a lot of reasons. Ultimately though, why was Umaga the guy for Vince McMahon here?
Well, he was the next thing we had to being unbeatable. McMahon was obviously trying to stack the deck with the baddest dude on the roster. And even though he lost to Bobby Lashley, he lost thanks to Stone Cold, quite frankly. And, but McMahon was just trying to hedge his bets. Good story there. And you talking about reality or you talking about fictionally? Storyline wise, it made a lot of sense. Reality wise, it looked good on the poster. It looked good on it was good booking. I always thought that was a good booking. And it was another thing. We were still committed to Umaga's growth, and him being a key role in this match at WrestleMania was not going to stunt that growth. And the same theory was applicable to Bobby Lashley, because at that time, that era, there was a lot of confidence in that Bobby Lashley was going to be a big star. And, it took a while. He left, blah, 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 came back. And of course, now Bobby's an integral part of what they're doing. So it seems, best of my recollections from watching when I watch. But Bobby's same deal. So both guys got marquee spotlights at WrestleMania. And like you said, that was a big WrestleMania, 80,000. They had the Super Bowl at Ford Field that year. and WrestleMania 23 outdrew the Super Bowl. And so, of course, before you tweet me at JRSBBQ, I do know that the field was used for seating at WrestleMania, and of course, the field was used for playing at WrestleMania at Super Bowl. But the number of folks were more in attendance were at WrestleMania 23 than the Super Bowl. Nice little fun fact. You can doctor it up any way you want, but it was a hell of a house, as the old timers say.
I know this sounds, I don't know, unbelievable, but I read Hardcore Holly's book, and he said that he was supposed to be Vince's representative in the match before Umaga. Did you ever hear that? Cause that would have been a much different look and feel.
I didn't know that. I don't recall that being discussed, but it could have been discussed with Bob and Vince. Hell, I don't know. But the right choice was the big monster heel that looked unbeatable. He had a stellar record. His losses were very infrequent. I think his losses were the same guy. But I think he only lost to Cena. And the last time he lost to Cena was using their ropes in the STFU. So I looked at it as sound booking, but I don't know that to be not true. I'm not aware that conversation took place.
Let's talk about what happens on the other side of this. Unfortunately, Umaga's injured here, and he's going to be out with an injury after WrestleMania. He never gets fully back on track into his title match program with The Undertaker that was seemingly planned. But coming out of WrestleMania, working with Vince McMahon and Donald Trump, and one of the real marquee moments of the entire show, you're supposed to be in a title feud with The Undertaker, but you're out with injury. Talk about bad luck, bad timing, huh?
Yeah. And it was challenging for him too, because the question you ask yourself is how is Umaga going to react to this setback? Is he going to make good decisions as he heals and rehabilitates the injury, whatever it may be, or not? That's what you worry about to some degree. But, it is a bad break, but here's the thing, you got to encourage the talent. Look, you're on the right road. That the company respects you. The company covets your work, and McMahon likes you. If the boss likes you, then you kind of got the game whipped. So, that's the message I was not, I think Laurinaitis might have been in charge of talent relations in that era, but I certainly still had my finger in the pie. I certainly see these guys at TV, and I was the guy that hired a lot of them. So I was still their confidant. And even to this very day, you'd be surprised who I talk to that's looking for advice or something to settling. So, and now that I'm not there, I have no agenda, and they're just my friends, and I want them to do well. So there's still guys that still reach out, and I'm happy to help them for the good of the business. It's all about, moving the business forward. That should be all of our obligations, whether it's you or the WWF, any company, AEW. I know we're certainly in that mindset. So it's a matter of moving the business forward, and it's our job to keep some of these kids that get down and they think the end is, all of a sudden I'm screwed. My push is over. I have my little run. I make great money, but it's not enough. I need to make more. So you got to help them. You got to pick them up. It's like motivating a sales team, Conrad. It's just simple shit, man. Positive grows positive.
Hey, is it just me, or do we all wind up eating out a lot more during the summer? It feels like when it heats up, man, we're just moving out and about, we're picking something up, or going out to eat, whatever it may be. But with Home Chef, you can save time and money, but still get that dining out feeling. Let me put you up on some game, as JR would say. Home Chef provides fresh ingredients and chef design recipes conveniently delivered to your doorstep to simplify your cooking experience. Whether you prefer their classic meal kits with pre-portioned ingredients and easy instructions, speedy recipes ready in less than 30 minutes, oven-ready kits with pre-chopped ingredients, or quick microwave meals that assemble in minutes, Home Chef has you and the entire family covered for delicious meals without the hassle. Home Chef has over 30 options a week and serves a variety of dietary needs, so you don't have to worry about what to make ahead of time. And not only is it convenient, but it's economical too. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on their groceries. Hey, I just want to mention too that Home Chef even has a delicious kid-friendly family menu. They've got 18 new options each week, and that'll satisfy even the pickiest of eaters. Hey, let me just give you a little pro tip. You want to make your wife happy? Order some Home Chef. Y'all start cooking together and you picked out something that even the kids would eat. Buddy, I don't know what you're eating for dinner, but I know what you're going to enjoy for dessert. Roll Tide. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 18 free meals plus free dessert for life. Yeah, free dessert for life. And of course, we're going to get you free shipping on your first box. Go right now to homechef.com/JR. That's homechef.com/JR for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Homechef.com/JR. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Homechef.com/JR.
2 weeks after WrestleMania, Raw was in Milan, Italy, and they opened the show, and shortly thereafter, McMahon's cutting an in-ring promo insulting the fans. He brings out the Intercontinental Champion, his boy, Umaga. Of course, he's got Armando in tow. And he says that the ECW World Champion, Bobby Lashley, wouldn't be on this show because he couldn't make it through customs. So McMahon offers an open challenge to anyone in the back to face Umaga in a title match. No one comes out. So McMahon challenges anyone from the crowd and picks a man from the front row who's introduced as Santino Marella. Leading into the opening match, Lashley interferes in a match and helps Marella defeat Umaga for the Intercontinental Championship. So swerve, bro. Lashley is here and he's going to cheat or help Marella cheat. And now a guy from the crowd is your Intercontinental Champion. Big debut for Santino. And it's a nice way to continue the storyline, get the belt off of Umaga after you've had this guy with this undefeated streak. And now he's lost at WrestleMania and now losing to a fan from the crowd. Does it hurt him or is it's still just good storytelling?
It's good storytelling. Didn't hurt him. You know, it's not destroy his career type shit. And I remember that night very well for a couple of three things. One was that I had Jerry Briscoe and I went to a place there in Milan, the hotel directed us to, that made homemade pasta. And I've had homemade pasta before, but I never had homemade pasta like that. So the food was great, and it was right next to a Dolce and Gabbana store. Funny how you remember shit like that. And I remember the cops were all over the place because there were so many bootleggers selling the bootleg WWF merchandise. Then you find out that there's not a lot we can do about it because they were connected, if you know what I'm saying. So you just didn't cross them. And, you know, I wouldn't want to be the cop that got shot or disappeared because of an illegal t-shirt sale. So that was that. And, I remember Vince told me before the show, said, you know, this kid, Anthony Corelli's, was Santino's real name. And he'd done a good job in OVW. He was really smart, still is, entertaining as shit. And so, Vince said, you know what I'm going to name him? And I said, no, I'm going to name him Santino Marella after Gino, Gorilla Monsoon, whose real name was, Bob Marella. And I thought that was cool as hell.
That is cool.
Vince had tears in his eyes telling me about that story. Gorilla was just such a big part of his dad's promotion and the fabric of the WWF and so forth. I just thought that was just great. And so Santino Marella, and I think I nicknamed him the Milan Miracle. That just came up, just one of those deals where I think this, if it comes in my head, so you say it and see if it sticks. And it stuck for a long time. The Milan Miracle. The miracle was this guy from the stand out in the crowd upset this monster. It's a miracle. God damn, it's a Milan Miracle type deal. So, it worked. But I don't think it hurt him. It made him relevant again. It got a story talking, people talking about a new story, freshen the story up, because he's still going to be Umaga, man. Still going to be Umaga.
Well, we've got big plans for him. On Backlash, we've got Umaga, Vince, and Shane wrestling Lashley for his ECW world title in a handicap match. And, they win the belt for Vince, which is kind of fun. Vince is your ECW world champ in a do-rag, which is hilarious. Umaga would continue to be involved in that feud, including a Judgment Day match where he has a return match for the ECW world title. Once again, a handicap match. This time Lashley wins though, but he didn't win the title because he pinned Shane and not Vince. So they set up a match at One Night Stand with Umaga aiding Vince in defending the ECW world championship against Lashley in a street fight that Vince loses. Boy, this has got to be, I guess a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it's awesome. You're in a high profile spot and you're getting to work with Vince. On the other hand, boy, it probably sucks that you have to work with Vince.
Well, I can tell you this, one of the things I liked about it was when Vince was wrestling, that means he was not sitting at the gorilla position producing the announcers. So Lawler and I would look at each other and not say a word, but we both had the twinkle in our eyes that, of course, Lawler didn't get lambasted. I got lambasted for Lawler more often than not, because Vince just never jumped on Jerry's shit. I don't think Jerry would not have handled it well.
Right.
And so I got it, stuff like, God damn it, JR, what's wrong with Lawler? Fire his ass up, God damn it. Okay. So somehow or another, in your view, your perception, Lawler's lack of productivity tonight is my fault. So that's how that works. So when Vince was a performer, it was a glorious time because it allowed Lawler and I to create our own content, much like we do on Wednesday nights on TNT. We create our own content. Tony Khan's not in our ear. Occasionally he'll say something he wants mentioned, or he changed an idea or something along those lines, because things are fluid. And when you do live television, things change on the fly sometimes. That's cool. But nonetheless, that was almost like a night off. It's fun. You don't have to look forward to it because you could get in your groove, you get your flow going, and hopefully the flow is good enough that the viewers like it. And it seemed like in that era, they liked it pretty good.
Let's keep it going here and talk about how Umaga in June is back in a feud with Marella. They made a vengeance on pay-per-view. Umaga is solidly in control, but loses by DQ. They do a rematch on July 2nd, and Umaga finally wins his Intercontinental Championship back. And not too long after this, he turns babyface by joining forces with John Cena against Carlito and Randy Orton. This feels weird to me. Umaga as a babyface, was he just so badass that the fans wanted to cheer him, or what's the thinking here? He's supposed to be this bulldozer heel character. He's been working with Vince McMahon as a partner. I don't know. Feels a little out of left field to me.
A little left fieldish, no doubt. But, you can go look back in time. For example, one that pops in my head is George the Animal Steel. George the Animal Steel would come out and wrestle all summer he was a high school football coach and a high school teacher. But when school was not in session, he would wrestle and pick up all those good paydays. And Vince's dad loved George because he was smart, he was reliable, and he was, big, ugly, hairy guy. And all of a sudden, George Steele became a beloved babyface. Same concept, Conrad. It's just a matter of how they're booked, how the segments are produced, and how the performers do their business. So was it left fieldish? Absolutely. But sometimes those left field shots are pretty damn good. So I think that's kind of where we were there. And then you also run into the situation where, okay, we have the ability to change the heel story, keep him as a heel, keep him on that same track, and just get him different opponents and create new scenarios, shoot angles that's going to marry him to new talent. Or you say, well, or we can just blow up that model and change tracks. Let's take another method of transportation to get to our destination. And I think that's probably the latter was probably what I'm thinking was, what more can we do with him? in that regard. There's a lot of things you can do with him. I don't agree with that, by the way. There was a lot of things we could do with him, but being a babyface was not a bad thing. And then, of course, his old rival, John Cena, being his partner was kind of unique, which obviously sets up a potential turn on John Cena at the right place at the right time. You could do that if you chose to. So I think that's what it was. The audience loved, look, we're edgy, we're physical, and Umaga was all those things. And then putting him with Cena just gave him a new coat of paint and made him at least a character babyface, as Cowboy Bill Watson described him, a character babyface. So I think that's what Umaga was.
After defeating both Carlito and Mr. Kennedy in a triple threat match at SummerSlam to retain his IC championship, he interrupts a match between Kennedy and the returning Jeff Hardy, assaulting Jeff Hardy and leaving him lying in the ring. So this makes me think maybe he's a tweener, maybe he's turning heel again. But it's clear that he has issues with Jeff Hardy. Unfortunately, it's not the only issue he's going to face in August. During the weekend, I guess it was August 30th that weekend, we would see articles posted by Sports Illustrated, the New York Daily News, and the Washington Post, and they all name Umaga as one of the many superstars who have purchased pharmaceuticals from an online pharmacy, which is a violation of the Talent Wellness Program by WWE. Specifically, it was said that he received growth hormone and some other things between July and December of 2006. And this is after the quote unquote, no drugs from online sources rule was instituted within the company. What do you remember about this situation here?
Well, a lot of guys were cheating, taking the shortcuts, being insecure, paranoid, same things we talk about wrestlers and entertainers, ball players in general. They realize their shelf life is not real long. It's not nearly as long as being an accountant or something. You don't get that 30 or 40 year gold watch for your tenure. Nobody's going to be in the same place, the same company doing that. But a lot of things those guys were buying were somas, and the somas are a downer. Help you sleep, help you rest. Well, I can't, a million excuses. It's just wrong. And the growth hormone can be justified by saying it helps with healing and recovery and things of that nature. But essentially what you're doing is you're going online and self-medicating. And that's just dangerous because they mix drugs, they mix it with booze or whatever the case may be, uneducated, albeit, but they diagnose their own ailments and they manage their own dosages. And we all know that that's not a real good formula for people to be able to diagnose themselves and then over-medicate. And that was the case in a lot of these situations.
A week later, he loses the Intercontinental title to Jeff Hardy, but later that night he teams with Carlito in a handicap match against Triple H. But Triple H is going to hit him with the sledgehammer shot several times, injuring him. That sets up a match with Triple H at No Mercy. It eventually becomes a title match because Triple H wins the belt. Ultimately, though, Triple H wins the pay-per-view match. Umaga is not going to be your champion, but still, it's another marquee spot for Umaga. On November 18th at the 2007 Survivor Series from Miami, Umaga's team would lose to Triple H's team. As we start to build towards WrestleMania 24 in March of 2008, Umaga was announced as being in the, or facing Batista in a battle between Raw and SmackDown at WrestleMania. And during this period, William Regal is with him and he calls him Umaga. And in 2013, Regal tweeted, "People ask me a lot why I used to say Umaga the way I did. It was so people would remember it. I'm glad I did. He was a great man." Unfortunately for him though, Umaga lost at WrestleMania 34. Batista beat him with a botched Batista bomb. He basically fell down when delivering it. During the match, interestingly enough, Umaga's getting cheered and Batista's getting some boos. What do you remember about that match? I mean, it's a pretty notable WrestleMania. Of course, we've got the Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels retirement match. Batista, who was a couple years before this, one of the biggest stars in the company, is now working with Umaga, who feels like he's sort of on the rise. I think a lot of fans remember the finish, unfortunately, more than the rest of the match.
Well, it was just it was the era that started to really rear its head about people expressing themselves in a non-traditional way. The audience knew that Umaga was the villain. You should boo him. But that's not how it works. It doesn't work that way now for sure. And it started to change in that era as well, all those years ago. So I don't think it's an indictment on Dave. Dave had been very heavily exposed, overexposed, shall we say. But it was a sign of the times. There was something about Umaga that the traditional male 18 to 34 demographic that they wanted to relate to. A lot of those young guys full of P&V wanted to have that same attitude, that same demeanor, that same impact, the feeling of being dangerous and almost unbeatable. They lived vicariously through Umaga in that regard. Now, that's not to say that some of them were also not living vicariously through Batista, but I think Batista in that role, it probably indicated that Dave was past due to turn heel. That's one way of looking at it. But it wasn't shocking. It would have been shocking, 4 or 5 years earlier. But in this changing times and the Attitude Era changed a lot of ways people thought about wrestling that still lingers today. It was just a different deal. So, but it wasn't shocking. Let's put it that way.
Let's talk about what's next for him here, or what could have been rather. This is a bit of a detour, but this same month as WrestleMania, March 2008, a legendary manager, Gary Hart, passes away of a heart attack at his home in Texas at 66 years old. The rumor and innuendo is that you guys had sent out feelers that maybe he could help out with developmental or creative, or even do some on-air work. And people liked the idea of, hey, what if he came in and was open to doing on-air stuff? He might be a great manager for Umaga as well. Sort of a throwback to the old Hart's Army or H&H Enterprises, maybe redo Hart as a Don King type with a criminal vibe, maybe dress him like Suge Knight with a mob style business suit. There was lots of different ideas that were rumors in this era. Do you think there was ever any serious consideration to bringing in Gary Hart here in 2008?
There was consideration, Conrad, but I don't know how serious it was. Gary was a brilliant mind. Gary's contributions would have been equally as valuable as somebody in creative, because he's a former booker. He had a very very fertile mind creatively, but he also had baggage. Gary was known as somebody that was hard to get along with at times, that he fell in love with his own ideas. If those ideas were not utilized in pretty much their entirety, he was not happy. So I do remember casual conversations about it, but I don't know how serious they were. I'm sure, they were floated by Vince. Vince thought about it. Then you're going to have guys in Vince's ear that, Gary could be a handful, blah, blah, blah. But I thought if Gary could contribute to this company, it would have been in a creative capacity, providing ideas, especially as it relates to building heels. He was very, very good at that. He had a unique run managing Abdullah, the Butcher, for many years off and on, and other guys. He was, Brody, a lot of guys he managed that were big characters and were heels. So Gary had skills, no doubt about that, we could have utilized. But I just think his past was probably, biting him in the ass, and it just didn't bode well. So it never got real serious, but it was discussed.
Today's episode and JR's Wiener is brought to you by BlueChew.com. If you want to be as hard as the summer day is long, then get yourself a BlueChew and bring that summer heat, daddy. BlueChew is a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. The process is simple. You'll sign up at BlueChew.com, you'll consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door. And the best part, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. BlueChew wants to help you have better sex, so discover your options at BlueChew.com. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code JR at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is JR, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast.
Let's talk about June 23rd, 2008. He's drafted to the SmackDown brand as part of the big draft. He's going to lose to Batista the next night in the main event, but it's by DQ. But unfortunately, some bad news is going to come his way in Johnson City, Tennessee on August 2nd. He suffers a torn PCL and he's going to be on the shelf for a little bit. We do see some promos in, late January 2009 hyping his return. And when he does come back, he has a new entrance theme and he's going to defeat the veteran Jimmy Wang Yang. But unfortunately, Umaga then suffers his first defeat against Triple H by DQ on the March 6th SmackDown. Fast forward to May and he's back after a 2-month hiatus. He's going to attack CM Punk on multiple occasions, repeatedly interrupting Punk's attempts to cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase. That sets up a match for Judgment Day. Umaga actually beats Punk here, but loses at Extreme Rules on June 7th from New Orleans in a Samoan strap match. And unfortunately, this not only ends their feud, but it's Umaga's last appearance in WWE. Before we talk about the release, let's talk about this run of bad luck, man. You tear your PCL over the summer, they hype up your return. You come back, you're working with Triple H in the main event. For whatever reason, you're on a hiatus. I don't know much about that. I'm hoping maybe you do. But then when he does come back, he's working with who's going to become one of the biggest stars in the company, CM Punk. A couple of matches here on pay-per-view and a Samoan strap match. Man, that's old school. But so was Umaga's style of work. I really liked it. And, I guess if you're going to have a final match in the company, a Samoan strap match with CM Punk on pay-per-view, that's, there are worse ways to have a final match, I suppose. What can you tell us about his run of bad luck here? The stops and starts and injuries along the way.
Well, it's a goddamn shame. It's unfortunate as hell. That's why I said earlier, along the way, if you're involved in administration and managing talent, you've got to find a way to keep that talent balanced in light or in spite of the fact that they're on this string of bad luck. Some guys handle it and some guys don't. We know Austin handled it. Triple H tears his quad. He handles it. You know, Shawn Michaels' back injury, gone 4 years. He handles it. It's not easy, but it can be done. But you got to have leadership. You got to have positive motivation, and you got to maintain contact. So, you know, a lot of guys are hurt. You know, you think all these guys I mentioned, there's not a week went by I didn't communicate with them when I was in that role. That was my job, and I wanted to know that the office, quote unquote, was thinking about them. So it was just, you know, I said earlier, you worry about how the talent's going to handle this setback, because we knew that Umaga could heal from a torn PCL. Athletes have that happen regularly, seemingly. You know, the kid from Joe Burrow tears his ACL and his MCL and has some bone damage from that knee injury. It could happen to anybody at any time. How's Joe Burrow going to handle that with the Cincinnati Bengals? I suggest he'll probably come through it with flying colors. Drew Brees has 11 broken ribs. I didn't know he had 11 ribs. The quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. I suspect he's going to come back when he comes back, and he'll come back successfully. So some athletes have it in them to do that, and some of them mire and get caught in the sludge, and they can't get out of it. It's like getting your feet stuck in quicksand. You got to lift them up and get out of that shit. But and Umaga had some issues with that, and because of his past issues, Vince just came to the end of his rope. And hey, look, nobody can blame McMahon for that. He did we've outlined the booking that Umaga had. in the company because Vince loved him. He loved what he stood for. He loved the monster heel thing, all that stuff. And we were babyface territory. So, having that monster heel to work with those stud baby faces was imperative. So I think that's kind of what that was, Conrad. I just don't believe that he didn't handle it well there. And I think part of that was because of the self-medicating situation that he found himself in.
So as we said, the next day, June 8th, 2009, the WWE announces that Umaga has been released for the second time. This time it's revealed that his termination was due to a violation of the wellness policy. Even though it was only his second failure, the rumor and innuendo was his refusal to enter a rehab facility led to the dismissal. If you had that to do over again, would you do it any differently?
No. If you refuse help, then you're denying that you have a problem. And the denial is one of the bigger issues that you can deal with somebody with substance abuse issues, that they just won't admit they have a problem, or I can handle it. I got this. No, you don't have it. You've proven on multiple occasions now that you don't have it. So we got to get you some help. We want to help you. We want to help you rid yourself of this burden and get you back going. All the rehab was simply to get you healthy so we could bring you back and make more money with you. But, guys are in denial, and they look sometimes at going to rehab as a sign of weakness. I remember having long conversations with Jeff Hardy about that. And it came down to where I finally had to say, look, if you don't go to rehab, we're going to let you go. He, maybe his pride was on the line, he thought, or maybe he looked at it made him look really weak that he had to go to rehab, but he refused. And so I did what we said we were going to do, and we let him go. Now, luckily for Jeff, he's rebounded. He's gone through he's clean and sober. Thank God. And look what that got him. It got him work in a nice spot, making a good living. And so we wanted the same thing, in a different time frame, but the same thing for Umaga. Let us help you get you well, and we're going to pay for it. So, and oftentimes too, Conrad, when we were doing those deals and somebody had to get some help, they still got paid. You can't let them, you're not going to help their mental state by them worrying about paying for their overhead and their mortgage and the groceries and school clothes for their kids, et cetera, et cetera. That ain't going to help them. You're just piling, it's just, you're sending good money after bad. So most of the guys still got paid so they could take care of their families and focus on good health. But Eddie just refused to go to rehab, and I just think he felt it was just an overt sign of weakness, and he didn't want to be perceived as such.
It's a shame. I wouldn't be me if I didn't ask this. It's not like the company found out about this wellness situation between Sunday night and Monday morning. I assume this was Vince McMahon's old get the match in the ring. We've promoted it. We need to deliver it. And then we'll address these problems after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely. We advertised it. The public bought tickets on it. They've already invested. Our audience, our fans, our customers, if you will, have already invested in it. Let's get the match in the ring and then move on. So that's kind of what we did. And it created another payday for him. And, but nobody thought that for sure he wouldn't change his mind about going to rehab. It's not like you got to go to, Timbuktu. I think he was living in Houston at the time. So there's facilities in Houston that he could have attended, been a part of, and got healthier. My vision was get him healthy, get him more aware of nutrition, and understanding what he should eat and what he should not eat, how he should train, how he should not train. Because now we know he's got a bad wheel. And yes, you can get it surgically repaired. But if it just kind of tips the hand that well, maybe some of these ligaments, because of the size this guy is and how he moved, how he ran, the stress he put on his knees, so his joints, is this just the tip of the iceberg? You never know, but it damn sure could be. So, but I never thought that, he'd bought a nice home in Houston. His family was comfortable, it seemed like. And he was living around a lot of the other guys. Shelton was there. I think Mike Chioda might have lived in that area. There were others, I believe. But nonetheless, that little wrestling community in the suburbs. So it seemed like things were good. But why he wouldn't go to rehab, we'll never know the answer. But I think a lot of it was just he didn't want to be perceived as a weak guy.
It's a shame. In July, he would appear for the World Wrestling Council down in Puerto Rico. He'd defeat Mr. Anderson in a singles match. 4 months later, he does this Hulk Hogan's Hulkamania tour of Australia. It's a series of matches. He's working with, Flair and Hogan in big spots here. I mean, he's certainly on the undercard, but the idea that he's involved in those main events with Flair and Hogan is a big deal. Meltzer would write, he had reached an agreement to return to the company shortly before his death. And the chance to return came when the WWE, at least according to the reports, was attempting to sabotage this Hulk Hogan tour of Australia. Umaga's probably positioned here as the number 2 heel behind Flair, but he's given a shot to return, and it was made clear they didn't want him doing the tour. But Umaga, being who he was, he kept his commitments. And the rumor and innuendo was that Hogan tried to get him to come to TNA, but he told Hogan, I'd already made a commitment to WWE, where he was scheduled to debut at or around the Royal Rumble. And he told Hogan he felt a degree of loyalty to Stephanie and Triple H, who gave him an opportunity for his biggest run. And man, that says a lot about a guy when he has opportunities, but he's going to honor his word.
Yeah, and exactly. Look, Umaga had great character. He was a good, like I said at the very beginning of this podcast today, he was good-hearted. He had a good soul. He just was kind, but he got taken off the tracks at times. He was influenced by others. And sometimes in wrestling, the worst enemies a wrestler can have are other wrestlers. And sometimes there are a lot of agendas in that regard. I want your spot, we'll screw you up. Look, I remember stories back in the day where a guy was a booker. He would book he would book a talent to go on like a 4 or 5 day run so that he could nail the guy's wife. That was not unusual. And so consequently you had, the booker, being, creating the situation where the wife was kind of like saying, well, he's on the road, and if I don't do this with the booker, it's going to affect my husband's bookings, therefore affect his income. And if it affects his income, it affects our whole family. So if I'm going to sleep with a guy, I might as well sleep with the decision maker and solidify our position. That was the wrestling business. Wrestlers sometimes are their own worst, or the worst enemies, sometimes themselves, but they're also, some of them that are influenced by other guys, is a real sad situation. And I've seen it manifest itself in different forms over the last zillion years I've been in the business. But Eki was a fucking good-hearted dude, man. And he was loyal. He was always there. He didn't no-show. He wasn't hard to get along with. If anything, he was too amenable to others' input. You had a whole group of guys buying that shit off the online. He wasn't by himself. And I would guess to say this, Conrad. This left to Eki to go online and buy drugs was at the encouragement of others, because he just wasn't, quote unquote, an online guy. So but he's such a likable, lovable guy, he just went along. And of course he went too far.
We should mention, as he's coming back from this tour, from Australia, he's on a flight with both Ric Flair and Britney Spears, and Britney goes out of her way to introduce herself and talk to not Ric Flair, Umaga. because her ex-husband, Kevin Federline, did a few Raw shows and she watched and she recognized Umaga before Flair, which is pretty remarkable. It's unfortunate that this is the next part of the story, December 4th, 2009, which is why we're covering this, because tomorrow will be the anniversary of his passing. Fatu was found by his wife in their Houston, Texas home, unresponsive and with blood coming out of his nose. As you said, they'd moved to Houston with his family and actually lived next door to a lot of WWE superstars in the area. His wife went to bed and he was watching TV on the couch. Earlier in the day, he'd casually mentioned to some folks he was feeling weird. Later, she went to check on him, saw he'd fallen asleep and put a blanket on him. She came down a second time later, but this time she discovered he wasn't breathing and had blood coming out of his nose. She called 911. He was rushed to the hospital and they managed to restart his heart on the way, but he wasn't showing any brain activity. He was on life support at the hospital for much of Saturday, and friends and family were called to come be at his side. He suffered a second heart attack and was pronounced dead at approximately 3 p.m. Pacific. He was only 36 years old, and the toxicology reports would reveal that he had hydrocodone. I'm going to butcher this. Carizoprodol and diazepam in his system. Houston medical examiners also found that Fatu had both heart and liver disease. It was determined the combination of his drug use along with his bad heart ultimately led to his death. It's officially ruled a heart attack brought on by acute toxicity of multiple substances. You've gotten calls like this a lot, Jim, and that's a sad state of affairs and a sad sentence to say here, but can you walk us through how you got the news here? Cause this is, another sobering moment for everyone in the wrestling community.
Yeah. It's one of those calls you just hate to get. You know, sometimes in that role back in the day, you know, you almost hated for your phone to ring. Because more often than not, they weren't going to call you and say, "Hey, JR, I really appreciate that great payoff last week for the garden," or whatever. There was something wrong. There was an issue. That's just their nature. So you get used to that, but you still dread the phone calls because you know, we always managed, at least I always managed, worst case scenario involved. And the worst case scenario is somebody to be told that somebody's dead. So I think that I'm trying to think back who called me. I think it was one of the guys that he lived near. It might've been Shelton. It might've been Kyoto. I can't remember. Like I said earlier, there was a handful of guys that kind of formed their own little community down there and bought houses near each other. Same housing edition.
Charlie Haas, Shelton Benjamin, Torrey Wilson, Shad Gaspard. A lot of folks live down there.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned that, it could, I think I'm trying to recollect. I think it might've been Charlie Haas that called me, because Charlie also called me about his brother Russ. And I went to that funeral. But nonetheless, it's one of those calls you just dread to get, man. So you look back at it, you say, what could have been done differently? Well, he could have gone to rehab and got off the shit. That would have put less stress on his heart. The second thing is, now with the wellness issues and the better protocol for in that company, for sure, you would have known if the guy had a heart issue. The same could be said for Eddie Guerrero. He died of a heart attack. Brian Pillman died of a heart attack. But the heart attacks were not, and some of them were DNA. Their DNA was such. But now there's checks and balances in place through the various blood work and the due diligence from medically that you can spot that stuff. But you're just talking about a different time and a different place. And, it also speaks to the point of, the independent contractor aspect. How much right do you have to impose on health issues and so forth? It's really a two-edged sword. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. But now at least there's checks and balances in there that these people with heart issues can be earmarked ahead of the curve and not too late. But I think it's Charlie Haas that called me, and they're very emotional. He had 2 young sons and a young wife, and they'd found happiness, it seemed like. And he'd finally started making good money. How he saved it, how he invested it, how he paid his tax. I don't know that story. But I know that it was Charlie that called me, and it was just a heartbreaking day. You knew there was issues, Conrad, but you never expect the worst in that regard. So it was just a sad, sad day in my life, and especially not poor me, but much sadder, obviously, for his family. And his family was extended. There's a big family. So I wish things could have worked out differently, that Umaga had made better personal decisions. But it's like it was a sign of the times. It's still, hey, look, it's still that way. As drugs get more refined, I would probably say it'd be scary to know how many guys are still taking oxycodone, pain pills. And when you self-diagnose, when you diagnose yourself, go online, buy what you think you need or what the other boys are using, or man, hey brother, you can get somas, you get all the somas you want, and they're cheap. They come right to your house. Oh, that sounds good. It's not good. So I think that's kind of more of the case there, where Eddie was allowing others to influence his decision making. I sure as hell wish to God that it was different, because he had so many. He was 36 years old. He had some hellacious earning years left in his career. And as long as you got a big heel like that, they got a spot on the roster, because you're going to build your territory basically around the star baby faces. And those baby faces have got to have somebody to dance with. And Umaga, more often than not, was a great dance partner.
It's really sad, the end of his story here. Meltzer would say, over the past several days, several different people who tried to book him to work on shows noted that he seemed out of it. He would be slurring his words and reacting slowly in conversations. He hadn't been working a lot, as he was expecting to go to All Japan, but the wrestling economy has worsened and they just couldn't afford him. Meltzer would note at the time of his death, he was living in Spring, Texas, just outside of Houston. He owned a nutrition store in the area with Charlie Haas. He was very close with Shad Gaspard and Shelton Benjamin. He even gave Tori Wilson her pet dog as a present. And his death was covered by a shocking number of press outlets, not just TMZ, but the Associated Press, Fox News, the LA Times, Yahoo, even at one point being the top story on CNN. And a lot of people are going to come after the McMahon, specifically Linda, for how many people are passing away in their 30s and 40s. And Robert Zimmerman of WWE would respond to these allegations, or not allegations, but all these attacks, and say, we asked him to go to rehab and he refused to do so. So his contract was terminated. And Meltzer would say that ignores that the company had started recruiting him, and there were plans for his return in January, just 6 months after being let go. This is something me and you haven't talked a lot about, but what responsibility, if any, do you think WWE holds for some of these guys who do pass away? I mean, I understand the response. Hey, we asked him to go to rehab and he didn't, so we terminated his contract. But if he really was in discussion to come back, I don't know, man. Where do you? He
would have come back, Conrad, though, with checks and balances. He'd had to pass his tests. He could not have any blemishes on his medicals. He couldn't become unreliable. There were checks and balances there as well. Now, I'm not defending the WWE wholeheartedly, but at some point in time, adults need to make adult decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, fucking be accountable. And I just, I'm not going, defending Vince and his company in that respect. Are there things they could have done? I don't know what it would have been, other than you try to get them help. You try to get them turned over to experts. You try to get them professionals to get in their life and to help them. And look, by the way, that's not it's some small cost. I can't tell you how many, my friend Scott Hall went to several rehabs, and the monies were just amazing what the investment was to help him get healthy. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm not going to sit here and say it was WWE's fault that Umaga died.
No, of course
that's
not.
Just wrong. It's not accurate. But at some point in time, adults need to make adult decisions and be responsible. And if you're the head of the household, you're the father, you're the husband, at some point in your journey, you've got to make better decisions, because it's been proven that left of your own devices, some people's decision-making abilities are tainted. And I think that's what we had here. A very influential, kind-hearted guy that trusted everybody. And the other boys were doing things, then it was almost like to keep that quote unquote competitive advantage, which is another fucking cop out. Well, I gotta look good. It's always something. It's always fades back to the company, fade the heat back to the company, fade the heat back more specifically to the business. But at some point in time, man, all of us have got to be responsible for our own shit and make better decisions. And I don't know, it's just easy for a Meltzer or anybody else to lash out at Vince. The reason they talked about Linda was because she was running for office at that time. And of course, her opponents were quick to point out any deficiencies in Linda's life that concerned the WWE day to day. And I don't know how fair that was, because I can tell you, and I was deep there, 26 years. Linda was about as uninvolved in day-to-day talent roster, talent acquisitions, all those other talent issues as anybody in the entire company. She just wasn't. But it was a political thing.
The Irv Mushnick article made the coal miner analogy. He says, I think she bears the responsibility in the sense that coal miner owners were responsible for the hazards coal miners faced in getting black lung and other illnesses. I don't know if that's necessarily a fair comparison, but there is some changes in the wake of his death. The WWE would clarify certain aspects of their wellness policy, which would have pertained to the return of Edward Fatu, the return of Chris Masters, and what is considered the likely return over the next few months of Jeff Hardy. All three left the company with 2 test failures, with Fatu and Masters both being fired after a second failure. Fatu was fired for refusing to go to a drug rehab. Masters was simply fired in late 2007, but hired back over the summer. The new clarification, which the company now lists publicly to its policy, is that if a wrestler leaves the promotion with 1 or 2 strikes and comes back, they still have those strikes. In addition, if a wrestler is fired for a 3rd strike, the WWE will not bring them back for at least 1 year. The talent would have to pass a drug test to be rehired, and the testing would be heavy for the first year back. 1 new test failure for a rehired wrestler who was once fired over drugs would be an automatic termination. So even when returning, in a sense, they will return with the equivalent of 2 strikes. The drug policy also notes that if a wrestler who has never failed a test, they will be tested roughly 4 times per year, and those who have failures will be tested 16 times per year. A lot of major changes. So listen, if there is a silver lining in the sad passing of Umaga, you got to wonder if his death didn't bring about some real positive change for the wrestling industry as a whole.
I think you're right. I think it's a good analogy to sum this thing up. It showed that we've got to do more. The WWE has to do more. WWF has to do more. Program's got to change. It's got to be more contemporary, and we've got to do more to help these guys make better decisions.
Let's talk about, we got lots of questions about Umaga, but one of them that really stood out to me, because Armando mentioned it to me, was the interaction that Umaga had with some of the guys from Jackass. Maybe most famously, Steve-O. I can't believe this is real, but this is tremendous. Armando said, when we did TV in Los Angeles, Steve-O and Chris Pontius from Jackass were there in the fall of 2006. And Steve-O got his ass beat, shoot style, on Raw because he wasn't supposed to laugh to the extent he did. So when he didn't adhere to the repeated requests for him to stay down and sell, Umaga beat that motherfucker's ass, including legitimately stomping on his head and knocking him out. And when we got to the back, we went to thank those guys for working with us. Steve-O said, when are we up, guys? He was so fucked up, he had already forgotten that we had done the deal. So pretty remarkable. What do you remember about Steve-O and Umaga maybe thinking, hey, this guy's not making me look like this hurts. I'm going to make it hurt for real.
All I can say is that the term jackass never fit anybody or any little group better than those dudes. You know, it's all sensationalistic shit. They were spot monkeys. Beat me up, make me bleed, make me hurt, make people uncomfortable watching. And so the term jackass never fit anybody any more appropriately. I'll say this, they had balls, but you know, the egos get involved, and you know, Steve-O found out that you're screwing this guy's livelihood, and that ain't gonna fly. So it was a little uncomfortable to watch, but in a sad, perverse way, kind of fun.
Ton of positive stuff about Armando in our comments. People absolutely loved him and wish that they could have seen more of him. Do you think this is one of those rare circumstances where he went out and got himself over? I know this sounds silly, too much, because the fans loved his persona, even though he was a heel. So they're cheering our big monster Samoan bulldozer, but they shouldn't be, but he was just doing such a great job at it that they loved it.
Was he really doing a great job as a villain?
Okay. There's a great point.
Was he really doing a great job? He's supposed to be disliked. You got to do things that, are going to turn the audience against you. And and look, he was Armando's a smart guy. And again, I loved his reliability and things of that nature. His spirit was great, but you know, he was green.
Right.
He was brand new in that role. And so it's when you got a heel going out there and they're not changing their game while they're still making the audience laugh,
right,
and respond in a jovial way, and they're a heel, then they're screwing up. I don't sound like Jim Cornette here. God damn it, you're a heel. I'm not going to, but bottom line, there's something to be said about that. That's how you're cast. You know, so, you know, Phil Leotardo in The Sopranos was a bad guy.
Yeah.
There was not one scene where that son of a bitch had one redeeming social quality. He was a great heel. And so I think that's the problem with Armando. He didn't know how to be a heel in that early going, but you're right. He was very talented and he was very entertaining, but you know, he could have learned something by watching a Heyman or a Heenan or a Cornette, some of those, Gary Hart. They had the quality. They knew their role. Sound like The Rock here. Know your role. And I just think Armando, it's not the fact he didn't know his role. He didn't know how to perform that role at that point in time in his career. But he was a hell of a good guy. He's put in the deep water before he's probably ready to swim in it.
Let's do two more and then we'll wrap things up. Jeremy wants to know, what was Umaga like to deal with backstage from a booking standpoint?
Always smiling, always willing to cooperate and run the play that was called, cooperative, lovable, a joy to be around, no doubt about it. He was the antithesis of what he appeared to be, that killer monster heel with no conscience, you know, being, you know, evil and all that stuff, what you should be as a heel, the villain. You're cast as a villain. You know, how many Bond villains made you laugh? I don't remember any of them. It just wasn't that way. So, but he was a joy to be around. And I'm sure, you know, we talked to a bunch of the talents, a bunch of his peers from that era. They would say the same thing. He was lovable, likable, and just was a beautiful, beautiful human being in that regard.
One last one, then we'll wrap things up. Jeff says, useless fun fact. Often when Umaga would speak, he was cussing in Samoan, but obviously production had no clue. I'd never heard that. Had you heard that before?
No, I didn't. Hey, Conrad, you know, I've always said that one of the greatest battles in wrestling was JR in the English language. So I have enough issues speaking the English as I don't speak anything else. A little carny, but they don't count. But yet, no, I didn't know that. I can see where it could happen. I'm sure it's happened in the past with, you know, Asian wrestlers, and we don't understand their language. They can say what the hell they want. So it's cool.
It is cool. And what's cool is we're going to be back here next week with you. I'm so excited about next week's episode. I was there. Armageddon 2000 from Birmingham, Alabama. You probably remember this for every top star being in a big cage match, and randomly Rikishi takes a bump into a truck bed of sawdust. We'll try to make sense of that next week when we cover Armageddon 2000, December 10th. We'll also be back on December 17th to cover Clash of the Champions 4 Seasons Beatings. And then on Christmas Eve, we're going to hit you with Starrcade 1990. Man, I've had a lot of fun doing these shows with you, and I appreciate you making some time today to talk about Umaga, but I'm pumped about Armageddon 2000. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was there. Maybe it was just, one of my heights of my fandom. Maybe it was just because it was in Birmingham. It certainly wasn't a silly bump, but we've got Kurt Angle, The Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H, The Undertaker, and Rikishi all in a Hell in a Cell. That's a marquee match, and I'm looking forward to talking about it next week, Jim. Yeah,
me too. What was that? What was the date of that show?
2000. So, December 10th, 2000.
Okay. Cause I was trying to think, we did TV down there, Raw in Birmingham. That's a different deal. Raw in Birmingham. And, then the Tuesday taping, I think, was actually in Huntsville way back in the day. And it was on a football weekend. The Sooners played Alabama, and I came down on Friday and went to the game, on the sideline there with the Sooners, and then, went to the, oh goddamn, what's that great, the famous barbecue place?
Oh, there?
Dreamland. Yeah. So I bought 2 Sunday newspapers, and parked my fat ass at Dreamland Barbecue and read the sports page. That's all I was reading anyway. Football scores, and they had great coverage of the Crimson Tide. Sooners got lucky that weekend. I think Shula was a coach. Oklahoma called a fake punt. You might remember that kind of got them out of a jam. But it's funny, all these great shows we're doing, the geography comes back into play. So like the homemade pasta in Milan, who the hell, my fat ass from Oklahoma going to Milan, Italy, and hanging out at the Dolce and Gabbana store because that was one of Jan's favorite brands. I bought her something too. I can't remember what it was. I had to buy her something.
I've been to your house. You bought her a lot of something.
Yeah. God bless her. I wish she was here. I'd buy her some more.
Well, you know what? Anyway. You can honor, Jan, and that's what you're doing over at jrsbbq.com. It was made by Mama, enjoyed by everyone, but Jan was integral in putting together some of these products, the Main Event mustard, the Chipotle ketchup, maybe most famously, this all-purpose seasoning. My goodness, people are putting that on everything. I saw people do their Thanksgiving turkeys with it, Jim.
I like it, man. That's how I did mine. You got to overthink it. That's how I did mine. I went to Whole Foods, and got a quarter turkey. So I got a thigh and a leg, and I seasoned it with one thing. It came out like a champ. $3.25, 2 hours, money, and just it was turkey dinner for one, but it worked out great. So you miss some of those. This is going to sound crazy, and I am a sentimental old fool. But I wanted my house to smell like it's supposed to smell on Thanksgiving. Even if I didn't even eat. All those memories of Granny's house and Mom's house and Jan, all those aromas I needed to experience one more time. And I got to do that on Thanksgiving.
Well, I'm glad you did, man. And I'm looking forward to continuing to make new memories with you here on the show. We'd love to have your interaction. Of course, you can get all these shows that we previewed early and ad free, and even video for some of these coming up at AdFreeShows.com. Lots of great bonus content over there as well. You don't want to miss it. There's ride along, there's watch along. There's a lot along over at AdFreeShows.com, but we really appreciate you guys coming along on our podcast journey. We've had a whole lot of fun this year with you guys. It's been a weird year, a challenging year for a lot of us. But it has been fun, to give you a distraction here on Grilling JR. I hope you guys are having a great, safe, and happy holiday season. And we look forward to being back with you here next week, talking about Armageddon 2000, sawdust and all. He is at JR's BBQ. I am at Hey, it's Conrad, and we'll see you next week right here on Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Heavy on the mister, cause I'm a cornbread dressing loving son of a gun.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Doug Gustafson, and we are from Columbus, Ohio. First learned of Conrad through his podcast network. I'm a big 83 Weeks fan. Probably got into a little bit more credit card debt than what we wanted to during the course of the pandemic. We wanted to get rid of some of that. My wife and I had luckily bought the house many years ago and had quite a bit of equity built up in it. We are looking to actually redo our bathroom, things around the house that we wanted to do with the other equity that we have left over. We've been talking about refinancing forever, and I finally just took the plunge and called the number, got a hold of him, and from start to finish, it was just fantastic. I had Diane within the day. The communication with her was fantastic. The process moved quicker than I could have ever hoped. My name's Doug Gustafson from Columbus, Ohio. I ended up saving $800 a month with SaveWithConrad, and am able to also update our bathroom.
NMLS number 32416, equal housing lender, SaveWithConrad.com.